We want to thank River City Insurance for being our episode sponsor and also being the home of the chair. This week in the chair, we have Dr. K of Shattered Glass Leaders. Dr. K is going to share with us about a difficult transition time in her life during the COVID year and how she used that to pivot into creating her own leadership company.
Yeah, so I am Kristine Medyanek. I have been dubbed Dr. K. I have a doctorate in business with a specialty in industrial and organizational psychology, which sounds like a mouthful. So I really like to kind of boil that down to leadership, motivation, and change management, right? That's kind of where my expertise lies. If you would have asked me 15 years ago if I would have been in a place of, educating people and showing up and facilitating, I would have thought you were crazy. But right after I finished my master's degree, I got into my first teaching role, and I fell in love with teaching at the college level, working with adults. I was in a non-traditional teaching environment, so my students were between like 18 and 70. Okay. But it was amazing, right? I found this like inner performer in myself. By nature, I'm an introvert. And so it does take a lot of energy from me.
Which I have not gotten that from you since.
No, it surprises people a lot. But my God, by the time the weekend comes, I'll be like, please don't talk to me for 3 days. Yeah. Which is part of why the business growth side for me continues to be a challenge, because some of the networking events and stuff like that just take so much energy. But I started teaching 15 years ago, absolutely fell in love with it. And before too long, I was building programs for faculty and building programs for students. I was working with community advisory boards, recognizing where some of our deficits for young adults were at, and recognizing that some of their life skills development and stuff like that needed to evolve. And so I really found a passion for professional development, and that evolved into more education, managing faculty teams, stuff like that. And I got to this place where I really recognized I'd like to be on the other end of professional development and not working with students, but working with businesses, because students are leaving the higher ed arena and then the workforce doesn't look like what they need it to look like. Mm-hmm. Leadership has changed a lot, and the way we do business has changed a lot. And the pandemic has been a catalyst for massive amounts of change. Like, we are in the midst of a revolution. And so I hadn't anticipated starting Shattered Glass when I did. I sort of built myself a nice long runway for the introvert in me that I thought, I will take 5 years to build this runway and take my time so that I didn't have to do so much networking, peopling in these large environments. And then there was a layoff with the large organization that I was with. They called us into like a 5-minute WebEx meeting, disabled our cameras, disabled our microphones, and they laid 160 of us off in a 5-minute call and said, thank you for your service. We will be done with you, and HR will call you by 2:00 today. And by the time we got off the call, our computers were disabled. We were all working. It was devastating. It was catastrophic. But Shattered Glass was percolating at that point in time. And so my husband and I sat down and we were like, what does this mean? Like, is this a sign? Is it go time? What about my runway? What about my 5-year runway? And so he said, Kristine, you did this for me 11 years ago. My job wasn't working. And we started his business. So we went through the entrepreneurship, small business development process with him. And I teach students to do it all the time, right? And he said, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I love that about my incredible husband, who's incredibly supportive, because he's like, even if we lose everything, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, well, I feel like that's not the goal. But he just said, it's go time then. If that's your dream, let's figure out how to make that work. Yeah. I have been continuing to build that. I will be going into my 3rd summer with Shattered Glass, offering women's retreats. And the retreats are absolutely my favorite offering. They fill my cup. Women walk away with all kinds of encouragement and support and recognition that they can set down some of the baggage that we've picked up through our professional careers. Remind me to come back to that point, because there's things that we face more in our careers than our male counterparts, if you will. And so that's where Shattered Glass came from. We've had a lot of pivots along the way. I am offering a teen series now because of the work that has come with women. They have all come back and said, I wish I had this earlier. I wish I knew this earlier. I wish I could have absorbed this earlier. And I thought, how amazing to empower teenage girls earlier going into their careers to say, you don't have to pick up all those shoulds that people tell you you're supposed to be, right? You get to live in your own strengths. You get to live in your own superpowers. You don't have to be everything everyone else tells you have to be. Mm-hmm. Do you have to reflect on things that people are saying, hey, that might be a weakness? That might be a character issue. Yes, you have to reflect on those things, but you don't have to own it. You can set it down and say, no, thank you.
Where did the name Shattered Glass?
Glass ceilings.
Okay.
Right? Because the idea was supporting women. Born in the pandemic, I was watching women that were so lucky to work from home with their Zoom school, young children, literally falling apart at the seams, right? Just completely overwhelmed. I can think of so many web phone calls where you're like on a Zoom call and my kid is in the background screaming, Mom, I have to poop. And you're like, sorry. Like, what do? Right? It's so incredibly disruptive to have people have to eat every 6 minutes when you're trying to work through your day. And women across their careers are struggling more with so many things, like being talked down to or saying things. I'll give you an example. I had a 360-degree review in one of my career spaces many years ago, and somebody wrote on my 360 review, she has a lot of ideas for a woman. Right? And we are facing those things all the time. And we're navigating these things all the time, juggling the kids and juggling the housework. Gender roles are changing. Gender roles are absolutely changing within the households and how we balance our households, but not fast enough to support the career acceleration that women are facing in the workforce, which is an awesome problem to have. But it means that we're drowning under the pressure of the household supports and the kids supports and the what researchers are calling the mental load of what we're carrying all the time, right? Somebody has to remind the house to take out the garbage, and somebody has to be thinking about the grocery list, and somebody has to be thinking who's picking up who from which practice on which day, and otherwise everything just stops working. And we're doing all of this while trying to navigate these big career changes and big changes in the workforce. And we're not lucky to be navigating the work from home arena. We're not lucky. Like, we have worked our tails off for that. And yet women are facing imposter syndrome all the time. We're facing, I call them the shitty shoulds, but you might have to edit that part out.
No, you can.
Wait.
I've had plenty of people say, can you cuss? Sure.
Yeah. So we carry the shitty shoulds with us all the time. I should be this. I should be that. I should be that. And setting those things down is exceptionally difficult because we're sort of trying to untrain generations of gender roles that have been established. And so Shattered Glass was designed to support women. But as I have navigated supporting women through the retreat space, most women are going through and going, hey, do you have one of these for my husband? Do you have one of these for my boss? Do you have one of these that my whole team can go through? And so some additional service offerings were born at that point in time.
So you started with, I'm going to work with women, but now that's not the case. And now it's more focused business. It doesn't matter men or women.
So
business.
My retreats are for women only,
Okay.
but I only offer 1 or 2 of those a year. Someday, hopefully it will be many, many more than that. I have a small business series that is for anyone. The small business series focuses on improving retention and turnover and really helping leaders in their day-to-day work and their teams elevate in their day-to-day practices. And that content is universal.
How is that content delivered? Is this like a video, an audiobook? Are you in person? What does that look like?
So I can do it by Zoom or I can do it in person. Locally in person is more fun. People are way more engaged that way. But I can run the content via Zoom as well. And the small business series is 3 workshops with a leadership planning session and a culture climate survey. So I can really assess what's going on with your team, right? That's where that organizational psychology expertise really helps assess what's really happening. And then I can make recommendations for what your team may need going forward for support. When I do the workshop series, I always run through Leading in Crisis, which is a favorite. It's sort of game changing for people to recognize where their empathy is playing a role and recognizing that empathy looks different for the different kinds of people you might be working with. I also cover generational changes in the workforce and the 5 generations we have actively engaged in the workforce. Gen Z's coming in screaming hot, and they are way different, even than millennials. And then I also work to cover the motivation typologies and tendencies, right? Because when you're trying to light a fire under somebody, you have to speak their language. So those tools are universally applicable. And I find that they're actually incredibly helpful at home too. Something fun about me is I have twin boys and they could not be more different as human beings. And I have to check myself all the time or I will force them to be me, right? Because that is most comfortable for me if people communicate like me and are motivated like me and prioritize like me. And yet, if I force them to do that, if I force them to be me, they will grow into their early adulthood feeling really disconnected from who they are, right? And then they'll spend a good chunk of their early adulthood, potentially in marriage, going, I don't know who I am. I feel this massive disconnect between who I'm supposed to be because that's how it worked at home and who I actually am. So my job as a parent, hardest leadership journey in the world, my job as a parent is to help them capitalize on their strengths, not be me, right? But to do that, I have to be aware of who they are and I have to spend time reflecting on that and I have to consider which of the areas bug me because they're different than me and which of the areas are weaknesses because of their personality set. Right?
Yeah. You said remind you about a comment about women facing different challenges than dudes.
Yeah. So, that quote that showed up on my 360 review, I had the one comment that was, she has a lot of ideas for a woman. And it gutted me. It just gutted me in big ways. And I thought, wait, am I not allowed to have ideas? And then I talked to some friends who were male friends, and they were like, well, maybe they meant it like this. Like, how awesome is it that you have ideas and you're a woman? And I thought, nope, that's not better. That's not better.
Someone put that in writing?
Uh-huh. And we face that all the time. Something like 67% of women feel like they were taught to be nice above expressing opinions. Right? 67%. Right? That means that only 33% of women navigating the workforce feel like it's safe for them to have opinions. I regularly, this is my favorite, when people go, well, you're so direct or you're so driven. Nobody says that to a man. Nobody says that to a man. And they don't mean it as, they might mean it as a compliment. They might. But if we wouldn't say it to everyone, we shouldn't say it to anyone. And women are allowed to be direct and driven, right? So navigating those personality types and recognizing it's not wrong for me to have an assertive personality. And I don't have to behave like this personality over here to be accepted. I get to be me. And if that's not comfortable for you, that's not on me. Mm-hmm. Do I have to learn in that space? Yes. Can my personality be a little bit abrasive sometimes? Possibly. I shan't confirm or deny anything at this point. So do I have to learn in that space? Yes, but I don't have to not be me, right? And we don't see men face that restriction and challenge near as frequently as we see women feel like they're not allowed to be themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say each lady I've had in here has in some form has spoken to what you're speaking on. I think the last lady that was in here is my buddy Andrea, and she is a wealth advisor here in town. And in that episode, we were joking, and I was like, actually, yeah, you are right, because she said some stuff, and then I was like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but then she made the comment. She was talking about like stuff for like women getting together, and because she said guys have such better like camaraderie, like especially in the business world, like you guys just do stuff. You guys go golfing. You guys are having beers, talking at the local bar, whatever. And I was kind of like, I've seen some of the Ellen and Kara and some of that kind of stuff. But then she was like, when's the last time that, I think she said this, or maybe I said this, when's the last time you walked in and you just saw like just a bunch of women at the bar having a beer? No, because they're at home probably doing something with the kids or something at the household. And I was like, that is fair. I don't think I've ever walked into a place and just seen a bunch of women. It's usually the fellas.
Well, and if we're really honest, the few times that we do take that time to do that, there are repercussions to that, right? There is the guilt associated with it. Yeah. Women carry a lot of guilt for the things that they have to take time out for. It's been one of the most interesting things about my business is my target market for emerging leadership, women that are emerging leaders or transitioning leaders, right? They have a new team. They're transitioning in their role. Those women are typically between 25 and 40, right? My retreats are this beautiful glamping experience with real beds. I would never put somebody on cots. Wine tasting and yoga, and it's glorious and it's relaxing. We have a sauna and a heated pool and a hot tub. That demographic of women is the least likely to spend money on themselves, right? And so they're like, I can't spend $1,000. I can't spend $500. I can't spend $100. I can spend $1 million, gajillion, trillion for my kids' new basketball shoes. Right? Mm-hmm. I can spend $1 million for my husband's activities on this thing. I can spend $1 trillion to go on a vacation with my family that's going to be absolutely exhausting for me. Vacationing with your kids and your whole family is not vacation, it's work. Right? I really think there should be a different word for vacationing with your kids than vacation. Yeah. I love my kids. I have 3 boys. I love them dearly, and I love giving them those experiences. But I tell you, every time I get home from one of those vacations, I need a new vacation without them. Right. So the weight that we carry in navigating all of those things, right? The moms, whether they carry it in person or in their head, we're constantly working with the clipboard of fun, right? That like list of things that has to be done so nobody dies that day. Mm-hmm. And so if we take the time out for ourselves, we feel incredibly guilty and we worry.
Yeah, that's how my wife is, Adrienne. I mean, I think about, she struggles. She's got really long hair and she struggles to, I think she like gets it cut maybe twice a year. And every time she'll be like, I need to, and I'm like, okay. Like, right? And you're like, it's bending over backwards for whatever, $150, $200, I don't, whatever it is, somewhere in that space. And it's just like, she's like, I don't want to.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband's a general contractor, and he will run down to Home Depot and walk around in Home Depot with like a tool in his cart, right? And it'll be a $500 or $600 tool, and he'll go, I don't know. And I will go, sure, no problem, do it, right? Like, will it save time? Is it effective? And I struggle to ask myself that same question, right? Put the whatever it is in my own cart, and you go, but do I really need the new bag that will make me so happy, right? Do I really need that pair of leggings? I joke with people now with clothing and stuff like that. I stop and I go, yeah, but it's price per wear, right? So stop looking at the price tag and start looking at the price per wear. Right. And Adrian should have the opportunity to go, but how many days in between do I get the haircut? So days per haircut. Right. Right. And then you kind of go, oh, that's not so bad. Yeah. But why do we as women feel so compelled to go, I just don't get to spend that kind of money on myself? Yeah. When the workforce has changed, we have changed, we're elevating in our careers, and many of us are bringing home as much or more money than our husbands are. Yeah. And we still go, right? $900 for the 2-day basketball camp. Done. Please get out of my house. $500 for a weekend away where I can decompress and kind of really focus on who I am and who I want to be, right? Get above the clouds and check the horizon. You go, oh, that's too much money.
Well, even when Adrian went to your retreat, even something like that, she hadn't done something like, I'm trying to think. I don't think she had done anything like that before. So first off, that was a new idea. And she struggled with that, to like that she would go off and do a thing and I wouldn't be involved. And she, whatever that meant, that retreat meant, like, yeah, I mean, you saying that is a real thing. 'Cause I know with her, she was like, but do I really need to do that? Or could, like it was difficult for her to accept that.
Right. 'Cause we worry. Yeah. We worry that the world will end if we stop being part of it for the day. I joke, and please no, I think my husband's the hardest worker I've ever met. Like, he supports all my crazy, and I can't imagine a life without him. He's the love of my life. But sometimes I call him Disneyland Dad. Like, I leave for the weekend, and you're like, what happened here? What happened with the dishes? And he'll go, but nobody died. So there's perspective for you, right? Like, true. Well, nobody died. Okay. But then you come home to work, right? You come home to work and you kind of go, oh crap. That just undid all the relaxing. And you kind of go, well, then is the relaxing worth it? Right? I don't know. It's just too much money to relax and then just have it gone. Right? So it's a challenge. It's a super challenge. And moms and dads are supposed to be different, and we're supposed to do things differently. And I love that when he's home with the kids, he is like building crap. Every time I come home, like Matthew, my youngest, has got all these new like swords that are built out of wood, or I'll pull back in the driveway and he's like, Mom, we built weapons. And I'm like, oh, good. But the dishes aren't done. It's fine. Right? But what a cool experience for my kids. But keeping that perspective in those moments when you walk in and you kind of go, oh, there's dishes again. Yeah. It's hard, and it's fatiguing, and it's tiring. And we as women are juggling careers as big or bigger than our husbands, right? That 55% of college students are women. That means that the workforce is going to shift to more women in executive roles, more women crashing through those glass ceilings. But to do that effectively, our male partners, the men in our workplaces, need to recognize how that shift looks for us. As I have navigated my professional career, it's been really interesting to work through some of the jobs that I've had and really recognize I feel a lot of resentment and bitterness if I have to take vacation for a sick kid. That's not a vacation day, sir. Yeah. That's not a vacation day. And yet it's the expectation, right? Like, and yet it's probably going to be my job because I can do my job from home. Yeah. My job comes in one of these fancy little boxes and I can take it anywhere. So sick kid day means at home, or I take a vacation day or my own sick day and I use up time when I could have still been working. So that, 5 years ago, that became such a huge priority to me that I could work from home when I needed to because I refused to take vacation to have a sick kid. Right? Those are the days that they don't even need you. They just lay on the couch. Right. It's great.
Right.
I mean, it's not great that they're sick, but like it's the only time they snuggle.
Yeah.
Once they hit a certain age.
Yeah.
And I got to this place where I thought, I'm not ever taking vacation for a sick kid. Right? Because I like real vacation.
Right.
The kind where I leave them behind.
Yeah. Yeah. So give me, because I'm trying to picture your clientele that you're going after. So like, let's say me and Olga, in a few years, we have 5 employees, 10 employees. And we hire you. What does that do? What does that look like? What are you trying to educate us on?
Yeah. Yeah. So from my perspective, for my business, the ideal clients are those businesses that are between 6 and probably 30-ish employees, or more specifically, the businesses that owner-operators are navigating a lot of their own kinds of day-to-day development and HR activities. Maybe they're running their own payroll or they've outsourced payroll. Professional development is one of the most important characteristics about retaining your teams. Late millennials and Gen Zs are putting it at the very top of their expectation list within an organization. So it's professional development, right? I'm bringing you in and elevating your entire team, focusing on the everyday leader in each of your team members so that your communication improves, right? And it always is really a lot of fun to go, oh, that's why Trav acts like that, right? Like we always have that person on the team that is super committed to the process, right? The process. And the other person that's like,
yeah.
Right? You always have that person. And those two people will drive each other nuts.
Yeah.
And as long as that feather ruffling is the focus among those two people, you never reach a level of innovation and synergy that you can reach if those two people go, holy crap, look at the strengths we can support each other through, right? So it's recognizing and building your team in a way that everybody is operating out of their strengths and the rest of the team appreciates and values those strengths. So personalities, empathy, I like outward leadership with the Arbinger Institute, so I will cover that when it's appropriate, especially if a team has a level of toxicity in it. Ask yourself, if you came home, well, let's back up for a second. Let's pretend that you left the dishes in the sink one morning and your wife spent all day creating a story about why you did that to her. How fun do you think coming home's going to be? Yeah. And then take that to the next level and ask yourself, what happens in the following 30 minutes, right? You start to go, why is she attacking me? Why is she acting like that? When literally you were just running late that morning, but she created this like narrative in her head about all the reasons maybe you decided on purpose to devalue and disrespect her by leaving your coffee cup. How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah.
Right? As humans, we create narratives all the time about what we think we know, what we think is going on. And those narratives are created often simply because we don't understand the people we're working with. We give people we love a lot more benefit of the doubt, right? We give them a lot more space and a lot more leeway. I mean, you have a child, right? You have a daughter. So if she like slammed into you at a basketball game and wasn't paying attention, you'd be like, hey kid, pay attention, right? Quick teaching moment. But if it was somebody else's kid, what's your response then? What a buffoon.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not yours.
Yeah.
You seem pretty easygoing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't let anything bug you.
I would actually probably be harder on my daughter than the other one.
That's fair.
Just because I don't know the expectations of
Sure.
the other, I know how I parent, and I'm going to parent to be aware and pay attention.
Right.
But the other one might not have parents that
Might not have any of it.
parenting that way. But that's just me.
Right. So...
But I might think you're a knucklehead for running into me.
Right. Yeah, what we do on the outside is not always the same as what we think on the inside. But what we think on the inside plays a role in how we start to experience the world around us.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you ever get a chance to look at my website or a lot of my social medias, you'll see a target on a lot of those activities. And the very center is personality, right? I believe with everything inside of me that we are born with a personality. They are as unique as fingerprints, and yet there is some patterns that you can assess and navigate, like the introvert-extrovert conversation and the openness to risk and task-oriented versus relationship-oriented, right? I believe with everything inside of me that those personality traits are born into us, reside in our soul, if you will. The next layer is experiences. And those experiences shape the way that our personality shows up in the world and can include things like culture, religion, family, demographics, and spending ability, right? The socioeconomic status, that's the word I was looking for. Generation, right? The generational cohort that we are part of growing up. All of those experiences, again, become part of that lens, which leads to the beliefs, and our beliefs impact how we act, right? But that's the part we see. The actions are what we see, and the actions lead to results. Well, in leadership, we often are tackling actions, right? Because it's easy, because I can see it, because it's a behavior. But we need to get way more center in that target and look at personality so that we're communicating effectively and consider the experiences that have led to somebody's beliefs, right? If you talk to somebody that coaches on money management, right? What somebody believes about money that has potentially grown up in a low socioeconomic status is very different than what somebody believes about money that grew up with a lot of access to capital or cash or money.
Yep.
Right? And yet those beliefs have evidence, both sets. And in both cases, what those two people believe is still only a fraction of the truth of what exists with money, right? And so our personalities and our experiences act the same way in the way we see the entire world around us. And until we can change somebody's experiences by communicating effectively from a personality language, then we're never actually going to get sustainable results. And so the design of the Small Business Series is to tackle those conversations, right? It's about the diversity that we see within our teams. It's about understanding and appreciating the differences that come from a world of background, right? And we only ever know a tiny bit of that. You've been working with your partner for quite some time, right? And you even said at the beginning of this, I'm excited to sit down with her because I bet I will learn something new, right?
Yep.
There's a lot. I always like that iceberg picture that shows what we see and then all the stuff underneath it. Right? Well, the goal of any of those workshop series and the goal of professional development is helping people appreciate the iceberg under the water.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a layer to this podcast. When I started doing this it started primarily with the idea of local business owners, but it's not just local businesses anymore. But my thinking was, it's easy to know of someone or seeing, I mean, I'm a small business owner, so I know how it's easy for people to go, oh, they own a business, they must have lots of money or this or that, and it's like, well, I know better than that because I'm one of those people. And, a layer has been of trying to show people, like, here's like a fuller picture of that person, of that business owner you know of. Now you might actually get to know them a bit more, not just know of them. And it's amazing the dynamic that changes when you get to know someone.
For sure.
And the way you view them now. And just kind of that, I mean, a big goal that I have for this is humanizing people. No matter who sits in the chair,
Sure.
no matter what your title is. I've had, some people that don't make a whole lot. And there's been a few multimillionaires sitting right
Sure.
there and everything in between, but humanizing people. And it's amazing the shift in how you view that person once you start to get to know them.
Right. Because understanding people's experiences, understanding that lens allows us to smash assumptions.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the goal in every team, is to stop making assumptions. You only know what you know. Right? I love Cy Wakeman's No Ego book. Right? And we often are creating these narratives to protect our egos. Right? And to get into a space where we can consistently say, oh, that's not about me. Right? And I don't know that, is really powerful and really freeing. It also is super against human nature. And so we have to practice it all the time. Right? We have to stop and go, oh, no, I don't actually know. Right? Like I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think I know, or I think I know parts of this, but I don't know.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like some of your challenges, what I would think your challenges would be. Because if I'm in your space, and you could tell me what they actually are, but I feel like it would be difficult to try to get into businesses because, number one, it would almost be like an admission of guilt of maybe our business doesn't have the culture we think it.
Now we're back to ego.
It doesn't have the culture that we think it would. I'm just trying to think like. That must be kind of hard to get in because you're dealing with a lot of leaders and business owners who probably think they're doing a great job, or that doesn't really happen.
And you might be doing a great job, but can you do a better job, or could you shift a little bit to increase something, right? Could you do a little bit better? It is really hard to measure return on investment in spending in development. So I tell businesses to focus on that retention and turnover piece. The cost of turnover is between 25% and 200% of the salaries that you're having to replace, right? So what is worth skipping that cost? Right. Aside from the burnout risk and which leads to more turnover and the anxiety, we're seeing really huge spikes in mental health issues. I was reading an article just this week about, the pandemic is wrapping up, right? We're sort of getting into this space of like, okay, we're living with COVID risks now. We're assessing them differently. We know enough now to know where we're comfortable with it, but the fallout is not over. Yeah. People are more tired than they've ever been before. And in a lot of ways, people are operating much closer to their survival brain. So one of my most popular workshops and uncourses is Leading in Crisis. And I talk about this elevator concept, right? What if we stopped looking at things as good or bad and started looking at the distance between good and bad, right? What if good was like great, right? What does great look like? What does my penthouse look like? How high is my penthouse? And my penthouse is built by the practice I've had at building resilience and the resources I have in my life. So my distance to great falling down to, oh no, I'm not okay. Oh no, I'm not okay. My distance is bigger than a teenager's distance would be, right? And so we're seeing our teenagers fall into that basement much more quickly because they don't have as many floors. Yeah. So what if nothing else came out of those workshops than recognizing the distance that your different kinds of people have between being great and being, I'm not okay. And I have some incredibly funny and relatable stories about that. And then you kind of go, oh no, I get that. I've had a sushi crisis too.
So how do you go about, I do this a lot with other people's businesses. I think like, how do they market? How do we get them more clients? How do you convince, because I look at what you do and I think, well, like,
everybody needs that.
Every business could benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me and Olga, it's just me and Olga, but like, yeah, as we grow, like I could see how the different dynamics, and I've worked for other businesses that there's a lot of, employees, and I have thought, man, it'd be nice if.
Well, and those businesses that are at that 30 mark and below don't have people focus on, like they may have HR that have personnel planning, but they don't have development planning, right? So those are the businesses that are really incredible to work with, because as they get bigger, you will have teams dedicated to development, professional development, and you'll have workshops and you'll have growth opportunities. Whether people take advantage of them or not is a different question. Yeah. But marketing, I do a lot of social media stuff, not as much as I should, but time, right? Yeah. It always comes down to time. My first year in business, I spent a lot of money on having somebody manage my social media and take care of that on a monthly basis. And it didn't show much, if any, return on investment. What I recognized really quickly was I am part of the unique value, right? And so it was showing a lot better return on investment by doing a 90-second something than daily posts on all the things with all the people. So I've shifted away a little bit and really tried to focus on doing my business intuitively in a way that feels good for me. And even if that means a little bit slower growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now switching gears, which is kind of usually the biggest part of this conversation, is your personal story of how you got to where you are. So take me back as far as you want to go, and what does that look like?
I mean, I think I started with some of that. I served in the Navy right out of high school. Okay. I learned a lot about a lot in that. I like to think of that as adulting by fire, really figuring out who I was early on. I loved the structure and the hierarchy and the clear delegation that existed within the military. And there was a lot that worked really well for me. I suffered an injury a year in, and I broke my hip, and I was disqualified from my job as a nuclear engineer. And I jumped right back into college at that point in time and started working on my bachelor's degree in management and finance.
How did you break your hip?
I got a stress fracture in boot camp, and nobody believed me. Until it was really bad. Okay. And so then I have pins in it now. I can always tell when the barometric pressure is changing a little bit. So it was a hell of a cool journey. I really learned a lot about myself, met some incredible people. I loved the brotherhood that existed there. And brotherhood is non-gender specific term, right? Yeah. The camaraderie was so incredibly intense. Through that, I ended up back in college, got married my first time. I like to call that my practice marriage. Learned a lot again. Mm-hmm. Long journeys of shifting and pivoting and learning. I lived all over the country. I have been in Norfolk, Virginia and South Carolina, and I lived in Arizona for a few years. I'm born and raised Pacific Northwest, but in cow country where the cows roam. So farm country is something that's always going to be kind of special to me, but I also really like the trees. So I ended up not back home. When I got into my first really professional role, which was mostly in accounting, working for a staffing company, I loved so much of that job. But what I realized really quickly was there was not enough time to take a vacation and see my family. So we're right back to my conversation about vacationing with kids, right? autonomy and time and flexibility are critical elements for me. You might blame that on me being an early millennial, right? Those are some of the things we saw with early millennials, that the workforce went, what are we going to do with these people? And I will make the argument to this day that we probably had quite a lot to learn from that early generation, or that early group of millennials. Had we considered what they were telling us, we would have been far more flexible with infrastructure when the pandemic happened. But now Gen Z is hitting the workforce and we're doing the same thing, right? Even millennials are going, oh, Gen Z, blah, right? And I think it's just kind of a natural part of human nature.
Yeah.
I finished my master's degree and jumped into my first teaching role. And like I told you earlier, I fell in love with it. Like literally walked out and I was like, this is who I'm going to be when I grow up. But I hate grading. I hate grading papers so much. And so,
why?
I think it might have to do with the content areas that I'm covering. I cover a lot of subjective content, right? I cover leadership and management and all this stuff. And though there's a lot of terminology, growing a business, it's not foolproof. It's not perfect. There's not a perfect roadmap. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to learn. You're going to have to shift gears. And so grading often feels like close enough, right? Like, did you support your idea? Because that's the best we can do in business is, did I support my idea, right?
Yeah.
And I gave it a good college try, even though sometimes it's a swing and a miss. And so writing all of that down is a lot, right? You did a great job trying to have an idea and your evidence says, but I think that that's going to swing and a miss, right? And oftentimes students don't have any practical experience. They don't have any hands-on experience. They have what the book shows. And so many of our academic books are academic and not super practical for that idea of a startup, right? A case study of Amazon looks a lot different than what your case study of River City startup would look like. And so some of the grading just feels rote and boring, and to write enough about that to make it make sense for students, it's just easier to do in a large setting. And I like the performance of it. I like the performing, the humor of it. I've had several students over the years tell me I should consider a career in stand-up comedy, which cracks me up. I don't know that I'd ever be able to pull it off, but I do think that that would be maybe something I'll do someday.
I could see that.
Just to give it a try, right? Just
I
to see what that looks like. I regularly have students in like silent body laughs. And people learn better when they're having fun.
I relate to you with the, when you said I forget how you said it, inherently, or you're more of an introvert. And I said that I hadn't got that from you when you walked in. But I'm like you, where in bigger settings, I get exhausted. Like when I was joking about greeters last week, it was really cool to go. It was really cool to see the response they had from the podcast. But like the bigger groups, I get so tired. I'm more of a one-on-one smaller group. For sure. And like in certain ways, I kind of like to be on, or I kind of like the production value of this, but it's very controlled. It's very small. The moment I get into larger settings, I can do it, and I can do it well. But then I am exhausted, or I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone tomorrow.
I got nothing left for you people.
Well, like this week is a bigger week for the podcast because I had someone yesterday, you today, and I have someone tomorrow, and guaranteed on this weekend, I'll be like, okay, I'm tired. I don't want to really talk to anyone. And I love it, but it does exhaust me because by nature, I am an introvert. I'm not the guy trying to talk with everyone. And but talking about like stand-up comedy, I've thought about that too. Like for me, for like a set, like I could probably get up there and do a set. But then it's like, then I'll go back to being quiet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see that with you. There's actually a couple female comedians that I'm trying to think of their names too, that your energy is reminding me of them. Yeah. You should try that sometime.
Someday. Maybe it'll just be one of those things that I'm like, I don't have anything else to do today. It's not today, but someday we might have a day where you're like, I'm bored.
Yeah.
Let's go do that. Which is essentially how I ended up in my doctoral program. Because I was like, what am I going to do next? Like, what's my next checklist? And things are pretty status quo right now. And I've never enjoyed that. I like learning, but I just also really like to know what the next thing I'm tackling is, right? As I've gotten a little bit older, I've really recognized that that's something that I'm going to have to like rein in a little bit. I love the adventure, but I also really need to protect my energy in this phase of my life. I've got teenagers and I've got an 8-year-old, and evidently they're busy all the time. So there's stuff that has to be taken care of to support my family, which means some of the other stuff just has to rein in a little bit. And I'm so grateful that I did my doctorate when I did my doctorate, because it was before our youngest came along, and I'm glad to have it done with. And getting to get Shattered Glass off the ground means that I get to use my degree and like apply it in really like official ways. I think that's one of the other challenges in my business when we talk about return on investment and what makes me different, aside from the energy and the work that I do with small businesses. I'm not a 2-day certification leadership coach, right? Like I have a lot of background in what I do, and a lot of research and a lot of applied research, and I'm published. But man, would I love to turn over parts of the business that I just don't want to do. I just, right? And some of that is those large networking things. And some of it is the like showing up to a room where we all pretend like we're not selling something, but we're all selling something. Right. And I just, sometimes that feels so non-authentic to me. And it is really hard to generate conversation out of thin air for me. I think I channel people that inspire me when I'm in those settings and think, what would my mom do? What would Bonnie do? What would, because there are people, and you've met them too, that can walk into a room and everybody's their new best friend.
Yeah.
That is not me.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, even when starting the podcast, the whole idea started when Olga and I were sitting out there. Almost this time last year is when it started kicking around the idea. But it was trying to find like what works for us and our speed, in our lane, and need to network. We're trying to start a small business and grow a small business. So you need to network. But it was like, what can I do that fits me and that is in my lane and something I would enjoy to do. And so this has evolved into a bit more than what I thought it would be. But yeah, I definitely, I can walk into the big room, and if I make up my mind, I can go do those things, but it's work for me. It might not look like it to other people. They might think, oh, he just naturally is like this. But it is definitely work for me. And maybe some people that's more of a natural thing, but for me, not really. And I don't really like having surface conversations. I mean, that's part of,
I want to dig deep.
These are long. These episodes, these conversations are long. And I didn't know starting this if it would matter or if people would tune in, because I knew they weren't going to be 15 minutes long. There's no way you can tell me about yourself, your life story, what you do in 20 or 30 minutes. So that was kind of a thing of like almost a proof of concept when I started this of, I don't even know if this matters. In the world of social media, I don't even know if it matters.
Sure.
'Cause it's like, entertain me now and then I'm off to the next thing. So my idea of this was almost like, how can I build my own maybe small chamber of commerce or my own networking group, but more on a individual one-on-one level, but still celebrate everyone, where you get to talk about your business and your personal story. And
it's networking for introverts.
Yeah. I mean, I've never thought about that, but
I kind of love it.
Well, using the power of social media, I mean, these platforms are free.
And they're
Instagram,
powerful.
Facebook, TikTok, I mean, and now I upload to a website called Buzzsprout, and it's the audio platforms. So, because when I started this, I was thinking, man, how am I going to like upload to Apple Podcast and Spotify and Stitcher and all these things? I don't want to do that. There's host sites where you upload one episode and then it shoots it out. I think I pay like $25 a month for it. And I just got an email recently from Buzzsprout for not YouTube, but just the audio downloads of last year's stuff. And like it reached 17 different countries. It was like amazing to think like I just started this and the reach that has.
Sure.
And so, you know, leveraging these kind of free platforms, at least they're free for now, can help introverts get out to more people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't heard that, but that's kind of fitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got your doctorate.
And I continued teaching.
Okay.
And I've continued teaching. I can't imagine I will ever not be involved in higher ed in some way, shape, or form. I built my own personality assessment probably a decade ago to utilize in classrooms because some of them that were out there were really expensive for a environment like that, right? And I really wanted to see an assessment that was really focused on not the 26 pages about me, but how do I cue into who I'm working with quickly, right? Like, how do I recognize some of those things? So, you know, one of the things that my assessment, there's a couple key things that I look at, and I look at extrovert versus introvert, openness to risk, and task-oriented versus relationship-oriented. Because when you're having a conversation with somebody that is adverse to risk and you're trying to get them to navigate change, the conversation is entirely different than that person that's like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
Right?
Like your husband.
Yes.
Well, we could lose everything.
It's fine. What's the worst that's going to happen? And, you know, I have more stories than I can count with that man. Life story side of things. We met on eHarmony about 11 years ago. Our 11-year anniversary is coming up in a couple of months, and we married pretty quickly. People were like, "You're crazy. It'll never work out." But he is absolutely the love of my life. eHarmony must have figured out the algorithm to match people accordingly, in ways that it's important for us to be similar. We align, and in ways that it's important for us to balance each other. We're sort of opposite. We're scuba divers. We're advanced certified scuba divers, and we started diving with sharks about 6 years ago. But it happened after an accidental bump in with a shark. We had been in Hawaii, and I had just finished my doctorate, so it was a celebration trip, and we weren't certified yet. So we were just doing like the shore dive, the Discover Scuba. And the dive master was like, "You guys aren't going to like freak out on me or anything, right? You know, you can't just pop up to the surface." And we were like, "Yeah, we know. We've got probably 20 dives under our belt at this point in time." And I said, "The only reason I'd freak out is if we bumped into a shark." And he goes, "Well, I've been diving here for 5 years and I've never seen one in real life." You want to guess what we ran into that day? So we bumped into a little white tip. It was only about 5 feet long. And it had its head stuck in the reef, like not stuck, but it was napping. And my husband and the dive master immediately started like trying to signal to each other about whether they could pull it out and hug it. And that's not the rules. The rules, when one bumps into a shark diving, is to back out of the situation and leave. Yeah. And back up against a reef, because they're not as likely to charge you if there's a large body behind you. And Trav will tell you, he was mad the rest of the vacation that he didn't pull that shark out of the hole and play with it.
No way.
No way. And I'm not even joking. The whole rest of the vacation, he was like, "Oh, I should have done it. I should have touched it. I should have grabbed it." And I was like, "Honey, what do you think was going to happen?" And he's like, "I mean, really, Kristine, what's the worst that could have happened?" And I go, "Death." Death. He goes, "Worst case scenario, it would have taken a chunk out of my arm." And we were super close to shore, so it probably wouldn't have been that bad.
He was okay with that.
And I was like, honey, you're a general contractor. We need your arms. Right? So his version of risk is so different than mine. And one of our first dates, he blew past that sign that says, please wait to be seated. Blew past it. Like it wasn't even there. And I stopped and I was like, there's rules around that, right? He goes, but there's nobody in here. What do they care? It's still rules. Right. And so there's been all of these experiences in our marriage that he has helped me along the way to be just a little more open to risk. And I have helped him not go to jail. And so we balance each other really well in that way. But my personality assessment that I've built really focuses on some of those key areas because the way you communicate with those different kinds of people is really important if you want to be effective. Even the most effective teams or the teams that have been working well together for a long time have something to learn from recognizing some of those minor shifts that they can do in communication. For instance, if you're working with introverts, don't call them first. Give them a warning. Warn them with a text message. Right? Phone calls are more exhausting than written communication for introverts. So if you can avoid the surprise phone call, I swear when my phone rings, I want to throw it across the room. What's happening? You just don't want, I'm just like, no, what are you doing? Or the worst is when you text and somebody calls you back. I text you on purpose, man.
Yeah.
Right? So you can get really effective and more efficient by managing some minor changes in the way you do to day-to-day communications by recognizing those things.
That's good. That's not something I would just think of off the top of my head, but I would rather you text me than you call me.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to, there's only a few people that if they call me, I'm picking up the first time.
Right. Send a voicemail.
Now that I think about it, it's like, it's my wife. There's not very many where you call me, I'm probably not picking up.
Yeah. Well, and the other one that I think is really a helpful, like, tidbit, kind of one of those golden nuggets, is if you can recognize when you're working with somebody task-oriented versus relationship-oriented. Task-oriented people need you to be on their task list. Otherwise, it's an interruption. Right? And so that appointment or that, like, when are you ready? When can we chat about that? Relationship-oriented people are like, cool, whatever. Let's always stop what we're doing. For task-oriented people, you've basically sent them to an early grave for the day, right? They literally want to fall out of their chair and die when you tap on their door and go, okay, can we talk? No, we cannot talk. I'm in the middle of Excel stuff. Yeah. It was very important, right? You can't just stop in the middle of that. I had a task list today.
Yeah.
And so if you can recognize those things and make tiny shifts, you help everyone in your environment conserve energy, allowing people to operate from their most natural selves to the best of their ability, which means when they can't operate from their most natural self, they have energy stores to draw from. Right? And that's pretty powerful if we consistently are considering the reserves we're giving to people instead of just doing things the way it's comfortable for us. Right? And that's where I say that idea of leadership styles is just, it's an obsolete idea. As a leader, and we're all leading something, as a leader, you don't have the privilege, you don't have the ability to just say, well, this is my style. Right? As a leader, you get to say, what do you need from me? Yeah. How do I shift to be what you need from me, where you need me today so that you can show up in your strengths? Yeah. And hopefully somebody's doing that for you as well. Right? So Shattered Glass Leadership is now, rather than just focused on strong women, it's focused on strong communities and elevating individuals, which has a positive impact on organizations, which has a positive impact on the communities we live in. Right? The more people we have conserving energy for the important things in life, the better we all are. Right? And they're such silly little tweaks. They're such silly, easy little things to go, I never thought of that. Right? Yeah. I never thought of the distance between good and bad. I never thought about the energy I was asking somebody to spend by calling them instead of texting them. Right? I never thought about what it means to just knock on a door because that's comfortable for me, right? Not me. Please don't ever just knock on my door. Please set an appointment. I'm so task oriented that I have to do silly things like put do nothing on my calendar. Because otherwise I feel guilty about doing nothing. But if it's on my list, it said so. And now I get to check it off, right? Like, I'm like, yes, I'm killing it today. But that's the only way that I can do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise I feel guilty about all the things I should be doing.
Yeah.
But if it's on my list, it's on my list today.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is it can be powerful getting, like you said earlier, getting people that have strengths in different areas. Like I help volunteer coach basketball, right? And the head coach there, who now him and I are turning into really good friends, there's a lot of similarities with us in terms of what we enjoy and whatnot. But our personalities, I mean, when we were first getting to know each other, I made the joke that my college basketball buddies, teammates, they nicknamed me One Speed because when I play basketball, I don't really shift gears. I just kind of have one speed. And so you can't speed me up. I'm going to go at my pace. No matter what you do, I'm going to go at my pace. And some coaches didn't like that. They wished that I would, transition into other speeds. And it's funny because when I told him, he was like, man, if I had a nickname, I would just be full speed because that's all I do is just go full speed. And, spending now a few months with him, we're a good balance for each other.
Yeah.
Because I have said like, man, I wish I could have a little bit of whatever your makeup is because, dude, if I had a percentage of that energy, I could take over the world. But like I get worn out watching. He's got to be doing something at all times. And then he has said, man, I wish I could chill out sometimes like you do, Trav,
sure.
because I feel so,
Yeah.
But I think we make a really good pairing, and there's other coaches there as well. But even as friends, like I'm finding like that balance of, he kind of makes things, more interesting, or there's more activity. And then he kind of likes that I mellow some things out. And so I could see how trying to teach that and implement that to make a business more effective, more efficient, the culture better.
Well, because you see value in it
Yeah.
all of a sudden instead of going, oh, One Speed's here again.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Right.
Right. We all are going to have our set of things we bring to the table. And if the message from the get-go is, oh, I wish you were different, right? But I don't have to be different. I have to learn to operate in my strengths.
Yeah.
And you as a leader are responsible to learn to recognize the strengths of the team members around you.
Yeah.
And you don't have the ability. It is not responsible to say you have to make me comfortable. Right? And
Yeah.
so we have to create that opportunity. And the best way to do that is to develop those really squishy leadership skills. Right? And I inspire people. Okay. Measure that. Right? I'm empathetic. I am a good communicator. All of those things depend on who you're working with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You might be incredibly empathetic and great communicator with the people that are like you.
Right.
But the more people and perspectives we have within our organizations at no matter what size our team is, the more opportunity we have to smash assumptions and create new and interesting things as an organization.
Yeah. I mean, that's really how Olga and I connected. Because I think some of the ways she was viewed prior on a more negative way, I actually viewed those things on a more positive way. She just moved a little bit different, but which if you didn't really pay attention, you might think was a slower, more negative pace. But if you really paid attention, you would realize like, no, everything gets done. She just isn't loud and she's not running around all, but, and I think I could recognize that too, because I've been made fun of with with the basketball thing, because I go, well, check the box score at the end of the game. Trav, usually one of the top scorers, He's usually one of the top rebounders. So,
He's doing
just
his thing.
because it might look a certain way, what, are the results there?
Mm-hmm.
And like with Olga, as I got to know her, I was like, I like that pay. I like that it's not frenetic and it's not, but had I viewed that differently, it could have been, that's not, she's not doing this, or it's not fast enough, or it's not loud enough, or, and completely missed her strengths.
Yep.
In that space. But that was only because I took the time to really pay attention and get to know how she functions. And then it was like, that's very effective.
Yeah.
She's just not loud about it.
Well, and the personality assessment, that's part of what I love about it is, for lack of a better analogy, it kind of cuts the crap out of dating, right? Like, and bringing on a new employee is a lot like dating.
Yeah.
Right? You're always like, is it going to be a bait and switch? Watching for it.
It was a good interview, but
we're watching for it. We're watching for the swap.
Yeah.
But if we can cut through some of that, like get to know each other and recognize those strengths more quickly, imagine how much faster we get to the next phase of being able to innovate, right? Like when we look at team dynamics, we always talk about the 4 stages. Sometimes books look at 5, but it's forming, storming, norming, performing, right? So we get a group together. We have to go through this process of like, right? And then we can get to performing. We can get to that like high impact team dynamic. But what if we could cut that storming phase down to 10% of the time with a 90-minute workshop? What if we could do that? Right? And so I have the workshops. I love the workshops. I love doing it in person. But I also recently launched all these uncourses. And so they're like video guided journals. I love them. I'm getting a lot of great feedback from them. But I love the idea of people being able to take this content and like open it again and again and again. And so there's journal prompts, but there's also QR codes that jump right to my YouTube channel with like 10-minute or less videos on the content that you're covering. So that if you're a team of 2, you can cover the material, right? At a much more effective way than bringing in a facilitator for a 2-person team.
Yeah.
So I've really tried to make the content available in a variety of ways. I have a collaborator friend that we're also running wine and wisdom workshops every month and a half or so to cover the content in different ways for those like solopreneurs that don't have a team at all, but might have a husband or might have kids or might have friends, right? All of this stuff, everyday leadership is universal.
Yeah.
It's universal.
You've made, I think I'm hearing you right. You're saying uncourses? What is that?
It's a video guided journal. So it's like an e-course meets a journal, but it is designed to take with you, to get away from your desk, go find your favorite cup of tea or your favorite glass of wine, which is what I would do, and your favorite spot on the patio, and go through the content, right? So all my most popular workshops have now been converted and available in uncourses, like leading in crisis and the ways to lead personality and leading across generations. And so you get into the book, and it's a book. It's a physical book that gets mailed to you. You start with a welcome video so you understand an uncourse, right? Because it is kind of a new thing. But the feedback's been really good because you get a video. They're all designed with the idea that most of us have short attention spans now. Social media has definitely shortened our ability to like navigate long things. So most of the videos are around 6 to 8 minutes. I can't think of any that are over 10. So you watch the video and then you go through a bunch of prompts, and then you get to the next chapter and there's another video and you go through a bunch of prompts so that you're learning all that content and you're engaging with the content in ways that you can also take with you.
Gotcha. Right?
You can throw this uncourse in your suitcase. You can throw it in your backpack. You can keep it next to you on your desk. The Ways to Lead Personality is a powerful tool to have next to you and be like, Trav is driving me nuts today. And then you can get back into it and go, oh, it's not him, right? Like he's just operating differently than me and he's acting out of his fun way or his nice way. Yeah. And I'm operating pretty heavily in my way. And I'm the one that can control what I respond to.
Yeah.
Right. And so just those reminders, those cues can be really helpful on a day-to-day basis. And so I wanted to create something that allowed people to have it at their fingertips more easily. No weird logins, no navigating the computer screen, and getting away from their desk. So you get the uncourse. All you need is your cell phone and a pen.
Gotcha. Well, sweet.
Yeah.
Have I missed anything? Is there anything else you want to share? Actually, how long did you work? You started off by saying you were it reminded me of Kara's story. She was working for some large hotel or something, and then one day she didn't have a job anymore. And she was 6-figure earner, the primary breadwinner in the household. And then I think she said she went to Bend or somewhere and started what am I going to do? But how long had you been working for? Was that in COVID 2020?
Yeah. Oh man, this is really heartbreaking for me. So I had this job, a dream job in mind, since I finished my master's degree. It was a job that I wanted. I had literally applied for it 100 times. I interviewed probably 18 times for the role over a 10-year period of time. 10 years I waited for this job to come through. Can you imagine the loyalty you'd have in people that had wanted that role for that long and kept going for it and kept going for it? It's the job that I went and got my doctorate for, if I'm really honest, but because I couldn't check that box that said terminal degree. And so I went and got my terminal degree, and I was like, that's fine. I'll go finish my degree and then I'll come back and I'll get the job then. And it still took another 3 years. It took another 3 years before I got it. I got hired for that job in December of 2019.
Okay.
Started the job on February 3rd of 2020. Got through all of my leadership training, systems training, all of that stuff, and had my team assigned to me. As a funny side note, a team of PhD CPAs. It's a special group of rule followers you've got there. So we had my team assigned to me on March 9th, and March 13th, the world shut down. Right? March 13th, Friday the 13th of 2020, the world shut down. And so now I'm a brand new leader with this team. I'm a brand new team manager, faculty manager, developing programs, helping these faculty navigate now students also in world crisis. And none of them know me, right? None of them know who I am. None of them know if they can trust me. And it was, talk about a major leadership challenge to try to navigate and break into new roles and responsibilities and trust when everybody in the entire world has gone into crisis mode, right? And we definitely experienced some growing pains in that role because there were some culture things within the organization that I didn't understand and I hadn't had time to get my hands around, and some difficulties with the team. And then all of a sudden I'm doing it in the middle of a pandemic. And so we made it through that whole first year of the pandemic, didn't see the kind of decline that other universities were seeing because we were 100% online. A lot of good things were happening with the organization. We thought the worst of everything was over. A lot of us were still navigating kids at home. The organization was really committed to self-care. They were like, self-care, 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 which is a terrible word to be throwing around to your team if you don't mean it. Just throw that out there. If you're going to talk about self-care, make sure you give room to people for self-care, and don't make them feel guilty for it. But about 6 months later, things started to shift and we could kind of see the writing on the wall. We knew that there was some organizational changes coming, not because of declines, not because of revenue changes, but something was coming, right? And so, yeah, I also knew that with the changes coming, I didn't think I wanted to stay in administration and higher ed much longer. Higher education is going under some major transformations, but students are changing and the way the landscape looks is really, really adjusting. And I really wanted to get to the workforce side of things in some way. I will always teach because I love it, but I really wanted to be kind of navigating bettering the workforce instead of trying to give young adults these tools that weren't going to meet them in the workforce, right? And so I thought if I could get to the other side, I could actually make an high impact change. If I could reshape the way small businesses are leading people and understanding people and supporting people, that starts to change the world, right? If we all start to look at the distance between good and bad and respect when people are too close to bad to make change, then we become a much more powerful society because people have space to be human.
Yeah.
And so, the news with the layoff happened, and it was devastating. It was catastrophic for so many reasons. You know, it was a long-term goal. It ended so abruptly. It felt really inhumane the way they did it, right? And we've heard more organizations have done the like mass WebEx call.
Yeah.
And it's always...
You said 160?
160 of us. Yeah.
They muted everyone's volume or what, and so no one could or I guess you could respond, but no one could hear it.
They disabled chat too.
Okay.
So we could only hear the VP say, effective immediately, your positions have all been eliminated. You must understand that businesses have to make hard business choices sometimes. We wish you the best. Right. And I just remember going, what just happened? What just happened? Right. And you go, and we heard of all kinds of other businesses that did the same thing following that. And I do like to hear the fallout on LinkedIn, right? I do like to watch the fallout of that on LinkedIn, recognizing that every single person that's impacted by that kind of decisions feels like they were treated like some version of an animal, right? Taken to slaughter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so inhumane. Is it efficient? Yes. Does it minimize the legalities? Yes. But at what point do we still have to go? And yet we're still dealing with humans, right? And so it broke my heart, and it stayed with me for a long time. And that was 2.5 years ago now. Does that sound right? 1.5 years ago.
That was, what'd you say, middle of
2021. So yeah, it's only been a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause my business is 18 months old.
Yeah.
And it was just a space where my husband said, okay, well, it's a sign, right? Like you've been thinking about this. You knew you weren't going to want to go back to higher ed administration. You knew you weren't going to stay with that organization for more than about another 3 years. But I had a 3-year runway. I had a plan. And shifting that plan around for somebody that's task oriented and, future focused in their planning is a really big hiccup, right? Yeah. And so again, we have to recognize, what does that do for that distance for somebody? Well, that lowered my capacity for navigating negative situations, which meant that some of those small things that should be small things felt bigger in those moments over the next several months because I was in a state of grief.
Yeah. They probably think they helped you. They sped your plan up.
I actually really look forward to the day that they accidentally call me for a professional development. I mean, they'll call me on purpose without realizing that I was a former employee.
Yeah.
And since that point in time, in the last 18 months, I've had a few people that were on my team reach out and go, hey, those positions have opened up because it turns out they trimmed too much fat. And I just think I would have to be pretty desperate to consider going back because of the inhumanity in that treatment.
Yeah.
Right. It was just gut wrenching.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a lot of stories, especially during the COVID time of that stuff.
But I do hope they call me for a keynote someday. And they're like, hey, your 3 books, we'd like you to come talk about one. And I'm like, that's cute. You get to pay triple.
That could be a great part of your story.
I used to work here.
Yeah. Here's what not to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Leadership 101.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Good to meet you. Obviously, I've heard a lot about you from Olga and Adrian. Spent some time with you. That was last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that customer treat is awfully fun because it's all people you know, right? Like you bring your own little group together, and the floating house is such a fun little space.
Yeah. That's up in Where's that by?
It's in Scappoose, technically, but it's just outside of Northeast Portland.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen some photos of that. I've seen a photo of Alex catching a fish, I think, right off.
Yeah. It's one of our favorite little spots. It's definitely my happy place.
Yeah.
Anytime I can be on the water is a great day.
Yeah.
I do have to get my boater's license this year, though, so that in theory I could take some of my retreat participants out on the boat and like take the boat downtown Portland. We can park downtown. There's a couple public docks, or you can take the boat north to St. Helens and park on those public docks. And there's some great little boutiques and shopping and food bars and stuff. And I think that would be a really cool add on to those customer treats where you bring 4 or 5 people together and go through the content as a group of people together.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely something about getting out of your normal environment. I mean, for any group of people, getting away from those normal things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's a unique experience on the houseboat there. And then if you could cruise it down the river, that'd be cool.
Yeah, the boat we'd take on the river. The house doesn't have a motor, but...
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
I learned all kinds of things about that arena when we bought the house. Evidently, there's floating homes, houseboats, boat houses, and they're all different, and don't confuse them. Or you're an idiot. Yeah. And you're kind of like, am I an idiot? I don't know if it's me that is the problem here.
Houseboat people. Yeah, that's funny.
Houseboat people, or are you a boathouse person? They're different.
Yeah, what is the difference?
A houseboat.
I've rented a houseboat before down in Shasta, but I don't know what a boathouse.
A boathouse is a house for a boat. So it's like a garage on the water.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it's mostly for parking your boat in.
Got it.
But a lot of times it will have like a little studio or a little kitchenette or something like that in there.
Okay.
A houseboat is a house with a motor, and it can be moved.
That floats down the water.
Right? You still need a slip to park it most of the time.
Yeah.
Because you can't just be on it forever.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have to go somewhere at some point in time. And then a floating home is a home that was built on a dock, right? So it's its own floating element, but it has no motor.
It doesn't go anywhere.
If you were ever going to move it, you would have to pull it behind a tugboat.
Okay.
And it's hooked to like electricity and sewage and all kinds of stuff through a moorage. Right. And so they handle that stuff and you pay your HOA fees. And
that's what you guys have.
We have a floating home.
A floating home.
When we bought it, it was a semi-sinking home. But we got a good deal.
Okay.
And my husband can fix anything.
Okay. Okay. Well, sweet. Well, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Yeah.